the regular meeting of the Pinehurst Planning and Zoning Board. Today's date is January 3rd, 2019. And I'll repeat the statement I made a couple of minutes ago for people that came in a little later. If you do want to speak, please sign up on the sheets that are on the back table for either public hearing number 1 or public hearing number 2. We do have a quorum, and we can do business. And I would like to have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 6th, 2018 P&Z meeting. Anyone have a motion?
I'll second that.
A motion by Joel Schreiberg, a second by Cindy Burnett, to approve the December 6, 2018 minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Unanimous. We are now ready for some new business, which is public hearing number 1. Before we start public hearing number 1, I'm going to ask if any member of P&Z Board has any conflicts or other issues that may not, that may put them in a position where they cannot participate in this hearing. Do I have anybody in that condition? No. Thank you. All right, I need a motion to recess the regular meeting and to go into public hearing number 1.
So moved.
Motion by David Kelly, second by
I'll second.
Julia Latham. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Another unanimous. We are now in public hearing number 1. And Alex, will you please give us the lowdown?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of public hearing number 1 is to consider a request by R&M Commercial Real Estate, LLC, for a major site plan review in order to construct a 40-unit townhome development, and the property is identified as Moore County Parcel ID number 980000634, and it is located at LaFerre Lane and LaFerre Court near the intersection of Foxfire Road and Linden Road. Board members who have been present, especially at last month's meeting, you may recall that a subcommittee was formed to meet with the applicant and staff to kind of discuss some issues that have been that were arose during prior public hearings, as well as some deficiencies with the submitted concept plan. The subcommittee meeting, I felt, was quite fruitful, and we have gotten a revised general concept plan following that meeting. And within the staff report that you guys will see, with a couple of requests by the applicant to ask for a waiver of curb and gutter. The assistant village manager of operations, as well as the village engineer, have no concerns with this, so long as ditches to the area are designed and installed, and that they feel that this is consistent due to the lack of curb and gutter in the existing adjacent development. The staff recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of this proposed major site plan to Village Council with the following conditions: that the location of the existing utilities be verified and the site plan be adjusted if need be. The proposed townhomes will be equipped with a fire suppression sprinkler system per requirement of the Village of Pinehurst Fire Marshal. And all runoff from the new impervious surface to be installed with this plan be directed to the stormwater management areas that are indicated on the general concept plan.
Thank you, Alex. I note that the applicant's engineer, Kevin Lindsay, is present. And Mr. Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and present your proposal? And we'll have questions from the board and then comments and questions from the public at that time.
You all have looked at the plan several times. We went over it. I'm not going to go through the plan and present it again. I'm just here to answer questions that you or anybody from the audience may have when they get up and talk.
Just so we're on the same page, we do have plans that are dated December 17th, 2018. Is that the latest iteration? Thank you. Okay, Board. Any comments and questions? Direct them to, yes, sir?
Yes. The last time we discussed the plan, I'd asked you if you all performed any runoff calculations to determine if the area that you indicate as the retention area could hold what we're talking about. And we were saying that, hey, we've just had the 100-year storm here recently, so maybe some things had changed. And I think your answer the last time, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I think you said that you hadn't gotten that far along yet. Have you, between the last time and the time this drawing was prepared, did you have an opportunity to do that?
Due to where we are in this, that doing the detailed analysis based upon what we have, we thought would be premature. There's ample space to do stormwater control on the site. I don't believe there's a problem, and if there is it would be identified and reviewed by the village engineer, and we would work out those issues at that time.
Alex, at what point do they usually present something like that?
At full site plan submission, not with the general concept plan phase, once if a proposal of a major site plan accompanied with the general concept plan such as this gets a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board and then reviewed in a public hearing scheduled and advertised by the Village Council, if they get approval from that, then they're able to proceed with full site plan submittal, full construction drawings, where hard engineering and all that is submitted and then reviewed by the Technical Review Committee.
Runoff calcs on a concept plan aren't that difficult to do, but okay, that's where in the process it comes. So I remember at one of the prior hearings that some folks from the housing right adjacent to this were talking about challenges they had with drainage during the storms. And obviously we've had, like I said, the 100-year storm just came through here a few months ago. But given the challenges they have on the existing site, no curbs and gutters, and we're kind of using that as precedent. We're saying, hey, we don't want any curbs and gutters on the roads, and streets and roads through this part of the subdivision because it doesn't have it on the other side. But aren't we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, not insisting on that, giving a waiver for that? Instead, wouldn't it make sense to insist on curbs and gutters here and then maybe go back and retrofit the other part to kind of help out the situation?
And that's a discussion that I think that the Planning and Zoning Board and ultimately Village Council will have to have in granting that waiver. The staff recommendation based on feedback from the Technical Review Committee specifically, in this instance, the Assistant Village Manager for Operations, Village Engineer, is due to the existing lack of curb and gutter, and then during full site plan submittal with the requirements in the Engineering Standards Manual that the 5, 10, 50, 100-year measurements and all will have to be submitted and reviewed, and that maybe those folks with their background and expertise can ensure that's handled. And based on those conversations that were and issues that were brought up in prior public hearings, and was also brought up with the subcommittee, the hatched area there toward the northeast corner of it is kind of was a suggestion that the applicant's engineer has provided of how they propose to divert it at the concept plan phase. So again, to waive the requirement of the curb and gutter is going to have to be a decision rendered by the Planning and Zoning Board advising the Village Council, who does make that decision.
Usually when you dimension that area, you have some sort of volume of runoff that you're considering, and you say, is my quote-unquote swimming pool large enough to handle all the water that's going to run off? And so we haven't gone through that. It looks reasonably sized, but I mean, that's just from experience. But my concern would be waiving that even at this point, and by that I mean the curbs and gutters.
Understood, and only the applicant can address some of those concerns.
Yeah, the issue in the existing development, it's not, the issue in the existing development, to me, does not appear to be an issue caused by the fact that there is or is not curb and gutter. The issue, as you can see from the contour lines on the plan, there is a depression up on the top of the drawing. And that area does not drain, And it may have at one time, maybe the DOT road ditches have gotten filled in with sediment, so they don't drain now. That's just a possibility. But most of our development, except for that hatched area, drains in the opposite direction. So, and it also has a much, you can see there's a lot more contours in the new development than there is in the existing development. So there's a nice slope in ours that will make sure that that area drains. But the fact whether there's curb and gutter, is or is not curb and gutter, does not necessarily mean that the runoff's going to work better or not. It will obviously go faster if you put it in a line ditch or if you put it in a pipe. You also have better chance for opportunity for infiltration, and so there's some, in a lot of ways, it's better environmentally not to have that, and there's a lot of encouragement now to get away from doing curb and gutter from an environmental standpoint so we can get infiltration. So, but that's, I understand there's pros and cons, and I would advise a client to look at the pros and cons of doing both of those. But that, as I said, we're not going to be contributing because we're going to divert all the runoff from the impervious areas in that hatched area into our side of the development. So we will actually be taking water that right now is flowing in through the woods, granted, but through the woods into the currently developed area, and we will be taking some of that, which will now be impervious, and bringing it towards our stormwater control measures.
We probably agree with each other that the curbs and gutters help to the extent there's impervious area, it's going to collect it and move it where you want it to go. So, Alex, in the new part of the subdivision, if there were curbs and gutters, where would it go? Would you all drain it to what we've indicated as the retention pond?
That would be up to the design engineer.
Is there existing stormwater mains running along there that we drain into?
There are not.
No. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Before we get to that, I should say that the subcommittee that was appointed did meet with Mr. Lindsay and a representative of the owner before Christmas time. We did have I think, a fruitful discussion about some of the other outstanding items that have been resolved. That subcommittee consisted of Julia Latham, Paul Roberts, myself, Alex, Mr. Lindsay, and his legal representative. So there has been some positive movement in getting this application, I'll say, ready for prime time. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, can I bring up, there were 5 areas, there were small areas that the subcommittee addressed, if you would, Mr. Lindsay. I think these were minor, and you reassured us they'd be taken care of. There was some discussion about parking. I think there was one additional parking spot that was to be added because your original parking plan counted a mail kiosk. Has that been, do you remember those discussions?
Yes, I believe. I think we addressed the comments that we were given. We sent that back to the staff, the village staff, and reviewed those. And the village staff, after that meeting, we revised the plans, provided them, and the village staff reviewed that. And I think the only thing that this plan did not reflect, I had an issue on the fire flow calculation that I gave them the correction on that. It still doesn't, it still meets with the sprinkler system. It would still meet the recommended flow. And I think all the other issues were addressed as far as, is that correct, Alex?
There's still a minor correction that's needed on note 9 regarding the parking spaces. It's not a total of 50, it's a total of 45. For the units that have parking in the front with no garage access, there's only 9 spaces, including 1 handicap. So that's a minor correction that you need to make on the plan. There is sufficient, in fact, probably a 50% overage in the parking provided that is required by ordinance. The ordinance requires 88 spaces. The correct total, excluding the mail kiosk area, is 125 that will be provided. in the pavement or in a garage or on the apron in front of a garage.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, there also seems to have been a density change to be in line with the PDO as well as the setbacks changes. Can you detail those for us real quick, what changes you made since our previous meeting?
In the original concept, there was to be another 4 units right as you come in on the existing drive, past the, I believe there's eight units total there. To the right of the unit number 6. To the right of unit number 6, there was supposed to be another 4 units, and that was removed from the plan because basically the existing development was probably a little lower in density than it needed to be, and so therefore we weren't able to do the planned density on the second half because they're not looked at together as we discussed.
How about the setbacks? There was one of the buildings that was encroaching on that setback, and you were asking for a waiver at that time.
Well, that was the building we eliminated, so that went away.
We also discussed this connection for this proposed development into the existing, I believe it's La Forêt Lane, that has access to Linden Road. There should be another condition, in my opinion, that there be no access from this development to La Forêt Lane until agreement is received from the respective property owners association or representatives that live in the existing development. And until that time, I would recommend that the pavement be cut short of a connection to any existing pavement that might be on site. Can you live with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Any particular distance?
I would recommend if we cannot come to, if we cannot work that out and be confident from a legal standpoint that we have a right of access there, that we will probably cut the pavement well short of that and won't extend it down that way. If we think we're going to maybe at some point have it, but there's going to be a temporary time where we don't have it, we would probably recommend putting up a gate so that people can't go through there. If we just leave a short gap of like, say, 10 or even 20 feet of pine straw, I think people would just drive through it on a fairly regular basis.
Okay. And just to reiterate, the project itself is located in the ETJ. There will not be a voluntary annexation request, and the pavement, although it's narrow as far as the village standards are concerned, and there's no curb and gutter, the pavement specification will comply with the engineering standards specification manual. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I do have one further question. Has there been any attempt to talk to the individuals that own that private road for access? Do you know, has anyone approached them yet?
I think what they've been trying to do, there's not anybody really representing the, quote, Property Owners Association, so they haven't been able to contact with them. I don't know if they have, I believe they have, but I am not sure where they are with trying to access the individual owners to see if they would have an issue with that. But the bottom line is they're not going to use that connection or make that connection if there's a chance that it's going to create an issue.
Thank you.
Question regarding the watershed protection area. The information we received said that because of the existing development prior to June 21, 1993, the property is not subject to further restrictions if it follows the originally approved plan. Do we have that originally approved plan?
We have, as we consider development to be many things, one of which is the installation of utilities, which has been installed per a plan that was submitted and recorded by, at the time, Hobbs Ups Church, engineering firm. Obviously, within the condition that you see within your staff report, more counties indicated that as-built for those utility lines have not been completed. So that's why we're asking that they be verified. And then we do have that plan that's available. It's been recorded, so we can match as best we can based on when we get through full site plan submittal to make sure there's not been a greater deviation or what appears to be an increase in impervious surface from that. If it goes well beyond that, then obviously it would have to comply with the watershed regulations. But currently, it's good to go as it is an existing development prior to 1993.
I have a question. Are these all two-story units?
No, ma'am. Some of them are and some of them are not. The ones with the, it's my understanding that the units with the garages would have a partial second story.
As I was looking at, they're all 1,500 square feet, but the impervious surface for the buildings is 40,285. So the difference between 60,000 and 40,000, I was assuming that, do you know how many of them are one story, or?
Not off the top of my head. And again, that's, we will confirm all that. We'll be resubmitting a site plan that is a set of construction plans for review and approval.
Although not required at this stage for a general concept plan, has any thought been given by the developer or yourself with respect to how waste matter garbage is going to be handled in these units?
I have not looked at that or discussed that. Something we'll have to work out. I'm not sure how the current units are being handled.
Well, 20 of the units do not have a garage, so there's no place to, let's say, hide a refuse container. So this is probably going to be a matter that's going to have to be worked out at preliminary final or site plan construction drawings.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments by the board? Okay. I have 3 people that have signed up to speak concerning this proposed development. And the first one on the list is Sonia Brown. Can I have your address, please, ma'am?
1322 Linden Road. I'm adjacent property owner.
Thank you.
Okay. I am still worried about fire protection for this development, especially since there's going to be one road in and out. If there's a fire towards the back of the development and people are trying to evacuate, you've got fire department, ambulances, rescue, trying to get in. Is there still not any consideration for putting some type of outlet in the back of this development?
We've got the entrance now on Foxfire Road. We're going to have that entrance for sure. If we can work out the access issues, we will also try to tie into the existing entrance on Linden Road. That would provide 2 entrances. It's not a requirement of the fire marshal. So that's where the plan stands right now.
All right, so you did add a different entrance or exit?
Yes, ma'am. We've got an entrance now on Foxfire Road.
Okay. Do you know how many hydrants are going to be put in there?
Let's see. Let me count them up. I think there's at least 2.
I'd have to double check, but I believe it's, let's see, there's one there, there's one there.
At least two.
Is that adequate for this?
Well, they're existing, I'm sorry, those hydrants are already there.
They're already there.
Ms. Brown, if I can, I'm over here. If I can add to some of your concerns, this concept plan has been reviewed by the Village of Pinehurst Fire Marshal, and he has indicated that it is compliant with his regulations, and for fire suppression, based on what adequate water flow is at the area, a sprinkler system will have to be installed with each of the units.
Have you talked to him personally, or is it only through the developer?
Personally.
The fire marshal?
Yes, he is a member of the Technical Review Committee, which is made up of Moore County Public Utilities, our Infrastructure Superintendent, Public Services Director, myself, Assistant Village Manager for Operations, Chief Building Official. Part of the process is that they all review this and ensure it compliance with their respective codes before it gets to the point where it could get a full site plan approval.
Okay. Is there any way to get a copy of the plan, like the one you have up on the screen?
There's one on the village website.
And if you need a hard copy, you can just come to the Village Hall offices or contact our department, and we'll be glad to provide you with one.
Okay, yeah, I would like to get a copy of that. And the other thing, I guess, had to do with fire protection, the water pressure. Is there a lift station? Did they put in a lift station up there on Foxfire Road for that area?
I'm not sure exactly where they have a lift station there, but an adequate flow test has been performed by Moore County Public Utilities to verify exactly what flow was there, what precipitated the requirement that these units be sprinkled.
Okay, but the residents will have a good water pressure?
Yes.
They will, okay. I think that's all I had for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Deborah Davis. May I have your address, please, ma'am?
304 Lafayette Court.
Thank you.
I thought I was going to have some things to talk about, but I don't. I just want to thank Mr. Lindsay and the board, how this process has been taking place. I appreciate it. So I'm good to go for now.
Thank you. Number 3 is Mr. Mordini. And your address, sir?
35 Forest Lane.
Thank you.
I got just a couple of questions. The size of these units are going to be, what are their sizes going to be?
The current village requirement is that all the units be greater than 1,500 square feet. 1,500 square feet or greater.
Everyone's going to be 1,500 square feet.
Yes, sir.
Number 2, have you, any consideration with the traffic flow in the corner here? We're talking about Foxfire, Linden, and Pine Vista, which all converge there. You're talking, what, about 120 cars? Is that what I heard earlier? Parking for 120 cars?
The total, based upon 40, was estimated to be a total generation of 290, 145 trips in, 145 trips out.
145 cars, parking area? Is that what you're saying?
Not that's number of trips. Some cars may make more than one trip.
That's parking at each individual unit plus outer parking? For one, like you can blacktop the area and have parking on the exterior of the development?
There's the units are a mixture of units with garages. So if they have a garage, there'll be a place for 2 cars to park in the garages, and then the driveway would also allow 2 cars to park. For the units that don't have 2-car garages, there will be a common parking area. Right now, I think we have 9 spaces for each unit.
Has there been any consideration of the the infrastructure for handling all that traffic in the future. Because people come down Foxfire in the morning, they're coming down Linden in the morning, and they're leaving in the morning, where you're having traffic right now coming down Linden toward Beulah Hill. It's starting to be an issue. So you're getting additional traffic. Has any consideration been given about the width of the roads coming out of Foxfire, Linden?
When we request a driveway, we made initial coordination with DOT, and they said we would not have to add turn lanes. Normally, when you do a development like this and you do a driveway request, DOT reviews it and determines if you need to make additional things such as additional turn lanes, traffic lights, stop signs, whatever. In this case, they said they did not feel there was any that would be required other than what we've shown.
Trying to eliminate traffic lights. I don't want to have more vehicles coming down here, so you have to put traffic lights up here. One of the reasons I moved here, my family moved here, is because we wanted to have a village and not a development. And we're seeing more and more development now, which means more and more traffic. You cannot get down Beulah Hill Road in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's 3 stoplights before you can make a left-hand turn now. And you're asking some are going to go down Linden out at the south end of Linden, but majority of traffic is going to come into Beulah Hill. So that's the consideration that I'm looking at now. And I live about a block and a half from that intersection now, and I just don't want to see more traffic coming in. I'd like to see development, but I don't like to see it in groups. I came down here for a single-family home, and I came down here for apartment buildings and townhouses. So that's all the questions I have.
Just by way of information and maybe clarification, the traffic generation of townhomes is much less than single-family homes. The traffic count that Mr. Lindsay indicated of 145 in and 145 out is based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers data, updated every year. And that indicates that the AM peak hour out is 21 and the PM peak hour in is 19. So the impact is not as great as you might think it was.
I've been here going on 12 years now. I go down Beulah Hill, 5 cars making a left-hand turn or going straight. Now there's 22 cars making a left-hand turn going straight. So that's just in 12 years. Now you're talking, this is 2019. I can imagine what's going to be in 2025. I may not live that long, but other people may. So I'm just trying to have controlled growth and not massive growth all at one time. And when you start putting down apartment buildings and townhomes, I'm looking at a lot of these areas, and they're not exactly cutting traffic down, making roads wider, so you can travel further, you can make turns easier. And that's one of the issues. Like now, you said we had a 100-year flood. The ground here still hasn't absorbed the water. I can imagine what's going to happen over there. I'm in a high area on Forest Lane, and my yard's still wet. The water table's 2 inches below the surface in a lot of these places. So that's a lot of consideration when you start putting up quote-unquote blacktop. The water's got to run off. And that's my consideration.
I think your original question was, has traffic study been considered in the
Traffic's going to
development?
be an issue.
And the answer is yes, it has, and there's data, and it's what's used to consider.
Is there going to be another follow-up meeting on this? Because from my hearing, a lot of questions still have been unanswered here.
There will be, when this board makes a determination whether or not to forward the application to Village Council, there will be another public hearing. Once they get it to make their decision, you'll be notified of that also.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. couple of people have come in late that haven't signed a sheet to speak for public hearing number 1. Is anyone else here that wants to speak about, yes, ma'am?
I'm Mary Stewart Regensburg. I live at 3 Innisbrook Place in number 6. And I didn't have an opportunity to sign that sheet, so my apologies. But my question is simply, you say that the townhome units are 1,500 square feet. Is that 1,500 interior heated space?
It's my understanding that the village requirement is that there be 1,500 square feet of heated space.
And is that what you've designed?
That's what will be put in. I'm not the designer. I'm not the designer for the actual units. I do the site plan, but that is what the developer will have to put in based upon the current.
Okay,
village
so that
requirement.
doesn't include garage space?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And that's also on his application. It states, all units shall be a minimum of 1,500 square feet heated and be less than 35 feet in height as per Village of Pinehurst requirements.
I see 2 more hands that want to speak specifically about public hearing 1. You're first.
Thank you. Kay Pearson, 45 Brandon Trail. A couple questions, and it's going to go this way, and then it's going to go this way. I'm a little confused about this particular process. This is an application for a major site plan, and then is there another, the general concept plan is going to come forward, and we have another public hearing?
This is the general concept plan.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And that's all on the website? The general concept plan is? I missed that.
The entire application submission.
And that would be located where? Because I only pulled up the, I had seen this before, the agenda packet, which just has this, it says site plan approval, then there's there's a.
It has the staff report.
Yep, okay.
The
So
site
this is
plan.
all considered the general concept plan?
Yes.
Okay. This looks to be an old copy, maybe, sir? Can you show us on that map where that second entrance, because this one, it looks like it's coming in off Linden, and you said there's one coming in off Foxfire?
That's the tax map representation. That's not the site plan.
Okay, go ahead.
This is the existing entrance on Linden. This is the proposed entrance on Foxfire.
I see, thank you. And my last question is, I'm going to ask you kindly. There's many people, I have not seen this many people here in this type of meeting. Even though you said you had given that overview of this project before, it's been delayed, it's been set back to you a couple times. I haven't heard the overall project. If you could just go over, just describe what you just did. This is where the homes are. It's very hard to see up on that. Even if you print this off, it's, I take my glasses off and it's hard to read. But would you kindly do that for us? Thank you.
If you bring the microphone so we can hear you. Just to back up on this development, make sure everybody understands, the original development here included what I'm forgetting now, is it 66 total units was back in whenever the first phase 1 was built. So this was part of a plan. That's why they put in the water and sewer for all of the units. And they even put in the connections. For whatever reason, that wasn't all completed. So it sat dormant for some time, changed owners,
and now someone has purchased it, and their intent was to complete the units that were originally planned for this development that already has water and sewer, and, you know, it has some access roads. Now, because of that time period, the current phase over here that has the loop driveway, we're not going to extend that. We're not going to try to tie into that. And there is some question, because the POA does not appear to be active, it's difficult to coordinate access across this existing road. I think the developer is going to try to do that and would like to make that connection, but he has to make sure that he has a legal right to do that before he can do that. So we've added a second entrance, or this would be it may be the only entrance, depending upon how it works out with the existing on Foxfire. So you'll come in, and there'll be a looped road that will serve multiple units. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 clusters of 4 units together in a townhome type configuration. Some of the units have garages, some of the units do not, based upon each type. Do you have any other questions, or does that explain it adequately?
I think I've misunderstood the amount of parking. At one point, you made it sound, I thought you said, there had to be 2 spaces per unit. So 40 units, that's at least 80 spaces, and then guest units, guest spaces would amount to some number above that. But then I thought you said in your initial explanation we're planning 50 parking spaces. So what have I misunderstood? How many parking spaces in total, including guests and residents, are planned?
In terms of designated striped parking spaces, I believe, unless I've miscounted again here, there are 50. There are 9 spaces with each unit that doesn't have garages. That will be striped spaces. There were 10, but we changed one of those to a handicap space. So there's 9 for each of those. And then at the mail kiosk, there's an additional 5 spaces, and actually there's an additional 5 spaces at the mail kiosk. So that gives you a total of 50 parking spaces in the development. That is a parking space that's not sitting in front of somebody's homes. Then at each...
Sorry, could you, 50 parking spaces not in front of somebody's home, what did you say?
Yes, that's correct, because you have, I'm forgetting the exact number, all of these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's 6, am I counting that right? That's 24. So in general, the units that have garages, just like any single-family home, they would have the 2 in the garage, and there's a driveway that can accommodate 2 cars.
Right.
So that's how we got that's how we got the others. That gives us the total number that we have on the plan.
So if you add the 2 garage spaces per each garage, you have how many with garages?
I think it's 20. I'm forgetting
I'm
my
familiar
number
with this particular developer, and I'm...
There's 20 with 2 car garages.
Okay, 40 spaces.
Right.
Am I right?
And then there was also, so like for instance, if you go, just like with a single-family home, if you go to visit somebody that has 2 cars parked in their garage, you can pull into their driveway.
Okay.
So that's where we came up.
Fine.
So that's another 2 spaces for each one of the houses. So basically, each house that has a 2-car garage has 4 spaces.
Okay. And then the other units, the other 20 units, if you're talking about 20 left over, will have 2 spaces per those units of striped parking spaces, plus how many, is that correct?
Also,
First of all, am I with you?
For the units, for each 4 units that has, that does not have a garage,
there will be 9 spaces out in front of those 4
Okay,
units.
so that's 2 per unit plus 1 guest space. So you'll kind of hope nobody has a party.
I mean, sure.
Happy New Year.
And I mean, if that was an issue with the staff when we got into the review, and, you know, and then we're complying with, we're well over the requirement. If there becomes an issue, there's plenty of places to park. I don't think that would be an issue. We could add additional parking if it became an issue, you know. But I don't foresee, in this type of development, that there's going to be a shortage of parking with all of the asphalt we have in there.
Are there any other questions on this application? Yes, ma'am.
Louise Velour, 13 Juniper Creek in number 6. I just wanted to confirm what this gentleman in the back was referring to when it comes to the traffic. We own townhomes in this area, and each unit was a 2-bedroom unit. And you originally said that the traffic would be less with condominiums than with a single-family home, and I have to beg to differ with you on that. Each of our units, they were 2-bedroom units, and every unit had at least 2 cars. It was a 1-car garage situation, so there was always 1 car parked in the driveway. The other thing that concerned us as owners was the fact that you had to back out of your driveway. And there were cars parked along the easement across the street, which blocked part of their exit from their driveway. And I think this is something you folks need to consider, particularly if fire equipment has to get in there or emergency vehicles. Because if there are cars parked on those easements, if there are going to be easements, since you're not having curbs and sidewalks, then I think that's something you really need to be concerned about, because you're going to have as many, if not more, vehicles that you have with single-family homes.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions concerning this application? Yes, sir.
John Taylor, 205 Cherokee Road. I just wanted to confirm something that I thought I heard on the traffic numbers. The expectation was 145 trips a day in and out. Was that the right number in total to this area?
145 in, 145 out, according to the drawing. Yes, sir.
Right. And 19 in morning rush hour and 21 in afternoon rush hour. So that's 40. That implies there are 105 other trips in and out during the non-rush hour periods. But what kind of assumption are you making about who the occupants of these units are going to be? Are they 2 wage-earning families who leave to go to separate jobs, in which case it's going to be a lot more than 19 in the morning, or are they not? And I'm not sure how you would possibly know that.
I'm not making any assumptions at all. I'm looking at the strip generation table that was prepared by the applicant, that is taken from data prepared by the Institute of Traffic Engineers and Transportation Planners. It's a document that's well-known, well-used. The data is updated yearly, and these estimates indicate that the peak hour traffic for 40 residential condominium townhouses would be 21 trips in that peak hour out, and in the peak hour in would be a total of 19. It's all based on data, statistics taken countrywide.
Which, like any estimate, means it could turn out to be wrong. I mean, if these are all 2-income families that move here because we've got new schools that are being built, we know there's growth in the county, it's an attractive place to live, then it's going to be more than this. And if it's 2 retirees, hypothetically, it might be less. And no one really knows the answer. Okay, I just wanted to be sure that I understood the numbers correctly. That's my only point.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Beg your pardon, one other quick thing. Did I hear 40,000 square feet was the covered impermeable surface? Was that a number that I heard used?
The impervious area for the buildings, according to the plan, 40,285 square feet.
Okay. I could do the full math, but I'll just take 40,000 divided by 40 units is 1,000 square feet per unit, which doesn't sound to me like 1,500 heated square feet unless they're all two-story units, and I thought I heard that they weren't.
I didn't say one.
No,
Okay.
I said I heard 2 stories and 1
It's going
story.
to have to be guided by the ordinance and the information that's on this plan if it gets approved.
But I don't see how 40,000 square feet and 40 units computes to 1,500 heated square feet.
I
If
understand.
any of the
I
units are
understand.
single-story.
I understand your question and
And if
concern.
he can't do that, he won't get a permit to put them up.
Thank you.
My name is Maureen Brophy. I live at 3 Shamrock Way.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Maureen Brophy. I live at 3 Shamrock Way. I've been a Pinehurst resident for 25 years, and I oppose a lot of this growth that you're putting upon us. I want to know if these townhouses are going to be rentals or a purchase. You don't know? Okay. And I have to agree with the gentleman about the traffic here. Our infrastructure cannot handle it anymore, and you just keep growing and growing. That's all I
Thank
have
you.
to say.
Alley, 210 Marion Circle. I don't understand the arithmetic. If you have 40 units, somebody has to pay for those units, and that somebody has to go to work. It sounds to me like you're going to have 40 cars every morning and every afternoon, and I don't know where the 150, it doesn't seem like a big enough number for me. Half of those are going to have 2 earners, 2 people going to work in the morning. That's 80 right there. And
Well, it all depends upon the mix of the residents, the ages, whether they have jobs or not, whether they're retired or not, single family maybe, single parent family, who knows? But that mix is all considered when this data is developed.
Okay, I understand that you're taking it from an average over the whole country. Maybe that's right, but extra traffic in this little town is going to have an impact.
Any other comments concerning this application? I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing then.
So moved.
Second.
Second? Then moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to close the public hearing is approved. We now have time for some discussion by board members and hopefully some kind of decision. So let's go from my right to left, starting with Mr. Marsh.
As far as the traffic studies, it's a little deceptive because the book, it's used by every planner in the United States. And you hear this one number of 21 out. Well, you can also look at it as a typical 15-hour day from 6 in the morning till 9 at night, 150 trips, that's 10 an hour, that's one person every 6 minutes. That doesn't sound like a lot. Also, you take the peak hour, that's 21. So there's 21 there. There can be a 2-car family. One might leave at 6 and one might leave at 9. So these numbers are averages. It might not come out that way, but the best estimate from decades of experience with traffic is this traffic study. There's nothing else that a builder can go by. Everybody can sit around and look and say, I think this, but this is the study that's done. So we have to go by that. So kind of think about that in your comments. The traffic is done. You can't change the traffic studies that have been for years. So,
Thank you.
that's the only one. We can probably go with the square footage next, but go ahead.
Mr. Hooper.
During our conversation, there were a couple of requirements that maybe you brought up, as well as maybe some others, that were going to be specific to this plan. Is there any reason we would not be able to move forward, or would those requirements that you requested to be put into this today? You had to add some requirements earlier that you felt that were going to be needed on this plan.
With respect to the connection to Lafayette Lane,
That's one of them.
I would,
There's no changes we need to make to any of our documents or anything today. We check marked all of our boxes.
that would just have to be an added condition that's already contained in the staff report.
We check marked all of our boxes as a board to address. Right. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett.
Well, all my questions have been answered, and this drawing is much more complete than the first one, which I greatly appreciate that. It's much easier to look at it, so I'm okay with it.
Thank you.
I said that all my questions had been answered, and this plan is much more complete than the first one we received, and it's much easier to make a decision based on this, so I appreciate the efforts that were made. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
I would just echo what Cindy said. Appreciate all the effort that's gone into, this is, I think, the third time we've seen it, and a lot of changes have been made, and I think a lot of effort's gone into it. So.
Thank you. Mr. Schreiber?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just reiterate what Mr. Marsh said, that the best we can do, or any planning and zoning board can do, when looking at traffic and water runoff, is what statistically experts give villages and planning and zoning associations to look at and make these predictions, and they give them to these people, and they pay a lot of money to get that information, and the information that they're getting is not biased. The folks that put it together have no idea where it's going to be. It's just statistically across the country, broken down by the provisions that they've got. So I'd just like everybody to understand that, both with traffic and with water runoff. We appreciate very much your concerns, which is why we ask developers and builders to give us that data. But I just want you to understand that you can either go to the people who get paid and have done this and printed books on it and teach classes on it and take their information, or you can just do it by the seat of your pants. That's not the way it's done in this village, and to the best of my knowledge, in most planning and zoning and most municipalities across the country. You listen to what these experts have done and the data that they've acquired over a period of years and studies. So I just want to make that plain. Thank you.
Ms. Latham?
I'd like to echo Ms. Davis's comment that a lot of the concerns that we had from months ago have been addressed. So thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay, for working through that process. And then I also just wanted to put out there, while it's not really germane to this development, because the parking for this development is in compliance with the PDO, just to acknowledge that we heard from the public that there seems to be a question out there as to whether or not at another time council should revisit parking requirements for multifamily homes.
Mr. Roberts?
No further questions than what I already asked this evening, and as well as the subcommittee, but certainly understand the challenges with traffic, and like was just mentioned with the number of parking spots, maybe that needs to become a top concern of planning future traffic management routes for the village in the future, because it's certainly a concern of the residents. No additional comments.
I just want to follow up with one thing. The question came out about a number of times about access by fire and emergency vehicles. And I'm not sure you all know that before you can get a permit for this, it has to be signed off by the fire department for their access. And I can tell you that they are not, if you think you're tough to satisfy and what those requirements are. The fire department sure doesn't want their trucks hung up when they have a fire. Their concern is as great as anybody in this room could imagine. And the same way with the emergency vehicles for health. So there are requirements that these departments have to pass off on before the village will even think about letting them have a permit to do this. And I don't know whether you folks were aware of that. Thank you.
I'll just add the comment to expand upon what Joel has said. Prior to receiving the application here for the Planning and Zoning Board, there's a technical review committee process, including the Assistant Village Manager for Operations, the Village Engineer, the Director of Public Services, the Assistant Fire Chief, the County Engineer, the Public Works Director of the county, and several other people, including staff of the Planning and Zoning Board, that review the basic development plan and the questions with regard to fire access, emergency vehicle access are vetted at that time. And if it hadn't been vetted and approved, it wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be here hearing the matter right now. Any other comments from the board? Do we have a motion? I think we're ready for a vote. Mr. Kelly, make a motion.
Yeah. I move to approve the major site plan for the LaForest townhome development with the following conditions. First, that the location of existing utilities be verified and the site plan be adjusted if need be. Second, the proposed townhomes be equipped with fire suppression sprinkler systems per the requirement of the fire marshal. And third, that all runoff from new impervious surfaces be directed to stormwater management areas, and that those be supported by engineering calculations. And if that's not possible, then no waiver to the requirement for curbs and gutters for the roadways be granted.
Would you consider an additional condition?
I may.
That no access to Lafayette Lane shall be connected until agreement is received from the respective property owners association or representatives of the existing Lafayette development.
Okay, accepted.
Thank you. We have a second of the motion as amended,
I'll second.
seconded by Julia Latham. We have a motion and a second. We need to vote now. Now let's do a roll call vote. Gwendy, where are you? Oh, would we have a roll call vote, please?
Approve.
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 Leo Santuazo. Okay.
David Kelly does, though. We seem to have an approval.
I recommend approval.
All right, the application is approved with conditions. Thank you very much. All those that want to leave now can, unless you want to stay for public hearing number 2.
Leo, can I request a 2-minute recess?
Yes, let's take a 5-minute recess until...
You're more than generous.
Well,
What you need?
here you go, man.
That was unanimous, right, guys?
I jotted down some of what you said, but you removed pretty quickly. I jotted down what I said beforehand, but I'm sure that you can reiterate it and we can...
Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job on trying to explain that industry standard trip generation.
Yeah, thanks. What can you do?
All right, Mike's on.
What comes up or how you get it, but, that's what Alice had me put up, so she was talking about these materials that we use. That's what I was.
Here's the basic problem. Ready? I'll state.
Oh, I agree.
And if you would please make sure you all watch this. I don't care if it's land. Oh, wait, I am the courthouses, so I want people to move here and rent my house. But I don't want to go. And I want all the land. I want all the land to remain just as it was.
They need to show up.
This is all right, that's what that's like. Or we can let people come and speak their mind, and regardless, yes, we should let them say their piece. But if it gets to be too ridiculous, like, well, I have my own calculated traffic, and I took 271. I'm not happy with doing exactly, I mean, sitting on this error, you know, I'm an engineer. We provide calculations and review it all the time.
You need to make them sign it. Because they feed on each other. And the same thing over and over. I don't want you to find it.
If it were not for public hearing number 2, would have been 5. Yeah, right? And that's okay. And public hearing number 2.
Hey.
That's all.
Oh, you are?
You see that writing on the wall, do you?
He did. I remember him saying on the side.
And now.
Yeah, they don't, I don't know what the procedure of it.
We'll see, right? We'll see. So, who did you get off the list?
However, everything is online prior, so, you know.
Well, last time it wasn't, if you remember, there was a document there.
I know
The
they were
engineer
not-
brought documents with him
Oh,
that weren't available.
that's right, the church, right?
No, not the church. Well, the church and Lindsay brought
Oh.
a version that was
Yeah.
not updated.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the staff, in all due respect. That was the applicant.
Oh, okay. Then it shouldn't have been,
I know what you're talking about, right?
and stop there, hey, sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
You didn't
the-
meet your deadline, you can't.
The village walks a, kind of a delicate line between being, you know, accessible to both parties, right? The public, but also to development. You know, I grew up in Honolulu, which is notoriously anti-development. I mean, it takes 7 years to build anything, you know, so there's that dance. But yes, I think Alex did acknowledge, at least on the first get-go with this applicant, they gave them too much good faith.
This was not Jackson, right?
Yeah. Too much good faith.
Well, if you've ever done it, I mean, I got guys who work for me who work.
Yeah.
And it's a job. I mean, it's like a job.
I know.
I mean, you know, I approved it because it met the conditions of
Right.
the plan.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I mean,
Right. And that's
I mean, I'm
all
trying
we
to
can
be,
do.
yeah, I'm not trying to put my subjectivity or opinion into it,
Right.
you know, but I've not seen a project that he's done well.
Yeah, well, if they're,
Ladies and gentlemen,
if their compliance, no, if
Please
their
take your
compliance
seats.
with this whole procedure was any indication, I'd say you hit that out of the ballpark. Feel bad for this engineer, because he's like, you know, what are you gonna do?
Leave that there.
So your name's not going to be
There
on
she is.
I'm going to extend my term after July this year.
I was a little, Leo told me that. I like having you. I'd hate to see you go.
There's other things I want to do down from the university,
Okay.
and my teaching days are going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays in the fall.
During the little break, one of the members of the community came up and suggested that we all make sure that they can hear us and we talk into the microphone. And having sat out there and listened to people who I couldn't hear, it's pretty frustrating. So if we just make a special effort, I think they'd all appreciate it. Thank you.
you're the first to offend.
And being the last.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are hereby reconvened for public hearing number 2. But again, before we start, I would ask that any member of the Planning and Zoning Board have any conflict associated with this matter, please say so, and we would ask that you be excused in that regard. Anybody have any problems?
No.
Thank you. All right. Need a motion to recess the public hearing and go into public hearing number 2. Do I have a motion?
May I request that we have just a couple seconds of preamble before we go into this? Is that possible? We have some discussion amongst ourselves and then go into public hearing?
If you don't mind, just let me kick it off and just.
Let's get it started first, and then after Alex introduces it, I'll do that. So I need a motion to go into public hearing number 2.
Okay, so moved.
I'll second that.
Motion's been moved and seconded to go into public hearing number 2. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're now in public hearing number 2. Alex, please introduce the application.
Okay, everyone bear with me on this one. It's a little lengthy and has a lot of numbers in it. So the purpose of public hearing number 2 is to consider official text amendments to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, specifically SR2 and SR3 of Section 8.6 Special Requirements SR to the table of permitted and special uses and special requirements. This amendment would change SR2 subsection 4 to read, the minimum size for a townhouse or cluster dwelling is 750 heated square feet for a one-bedroom dwelling, 1,000 heated square feet for a two-bedroom dwelling, and 1,250 heated square feet for a three-bedroom dwelling. This amendment would also change SR3 subsection 1 to read, the minimum size for a multifamily dwelling is 750 heated square feet for one-bedroom dwelling, 1,000 heated square feet for a two-bedroom dwelling, and 1,250 heated square feet for a three-bedroom dwelling. The applicant on file is the Village of Pinehurst, and if the board may recall last month's meeting, this public hearing item was continued to this scheduled meeting date. A lot of it based on concern that was arose during that public hearing by the citizens, and to have a better effort and time to for the subcommittee that did the work and make the recommendation share their sources that they reviewed and met over to discuss. And with your staff report too, you also see a staff memo that does kind of give the board a little direction and what action could be taken today. One of those could be to continue once again. Another item could be to reevaluate the proposed amendment a little further, approve as drafted, take no action, or also approve the text amendment with that is not as drafted with different numerical values. Thank you.
Thank you. I know a lot of people here tonight are here specifically for this this item and this question. What I would like to do is hear from a spokesperson who has had a chance to gather the information that was sent to you concerning the data that this board used to put together our original recommendation. We know the concerns. We heard the concerns last month. I'm not cutting people off, but I want to minimize the number of people that speak. I don't want to hear the same comments or question over and over again. So if there is a spokesperson who is available to address any concerns that were developed as a result of your review of the material that we submitted, please come forward and let's hear from you. Is there such a person?
Can I anticipate it by asking a few questions in the preamble that I...
Just a minute, please. Hold on a second. I'll get right back to you.
Yeah. I had asked before when we went into public hearing if it was possible we could talk for a couple seconds about this. Would you give the floor to me for a second or two? Okay. So I was absent at the last meeting, so I didn't hear what the public response was. But in the past, in other times that this particular issue has come up, I was asking us as a board what was driving it and where it was coming from. And the response was, well, the village council wants us to look at this. And so in past discussions, I brought up to the board that, well, we have a process where we develop a PDO, which is here, and we also develop what I would call a master plan. I forget the nickname we call it here in Pinehurst, but it's basically the master plan for the village. And that process is ongoing, and it's a public process. And from that comes the different areas that are zoned and how they're zoned and how it should be treated. And so the other question that I asked in the past was, well, do we have pending applications or requests for waivers or variances to the 1,500 heated square feet that's driving this? No, we don't. All right. So there exists, and I also brought up that there exists a process, it must exist de facto because the thing's sitting right there, where you can build apartment-type structures, but it requires a variance. and it requires going through a certain process. So given that we lack that, what is driving us to make the change to the PDO? And I would guess that there aren't very many people here who are coming out to speak vehemently in favor of this change. I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken. There's going to be somebody who runs up to the microphone and says, I insist we have 750 heated square feet. But we're basically doubling the density by doing this. And I don't see the driver of it. What we had talked about in our board here was that we were going to wait for the approval of the master plan, and then we'd have in front of us the two documents. And if it came out that there was a driver for apartment-type structures and places in our zoning maps which were zoned to be for apartment-type structures, high density, then we would consider those applications and develop and move in through the PDO process as it's outlined. But given that, I'm not sure I quite understand why we're moving forward with this. Sorry I missed the last meeting, but that's just my preamble. Maybe I was the spokesman.
Oh, glad you were. Succinctly put. Nothing is really driving this discussion except that the Village Council has asked way back in April or May of 1917 that this body look at this particular question. We now...
I think 2017.
2017, what did I say?
19.
You gave the mayor a few more years than she has.
If it was then, it would be all over, right?
Mr. Tufts would have decided that then, probably.
Okay, 2017. And we have heard that there is no rush. And what I'd like to do, as I said, is as briefly as possible to have some other spokesman, perhaps, if there is such a person present tonight, to tell us what was gleaned from the material that was sent to you to review. Mrs. Hogeman, just let me finish before we get going. I want to hear that, and that, together with the comments from last month, will be taken into consideration to adopt a report or prepare a report that the Village Council asked for to substantiate or unsubstantiate whether or not there is a real need for codifying heated square footage areas for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments in the Village of Pinehurst. We are going to reconvene the original subcommittee with a new member of the board to fill out the work and research that's going to be needed to prepare this report. I can't tell you exactly when that report is going to be done. It will probably be done prior to the first blush of the comprehensive plan. That's going to be sometime in spring, whether it be April or May, we don't know exactly, but we will get the report finished prior to that time. So, with that said, Mrs. Hogeman.
Let me just make a comment about some of this. What's been said up here in the last few minutes is that not only has Planning and Zoning heard your concerns, the Village Council has heard your concerns. There is no rush to do this. It was a request, and I'm just paraphrasing what other folks have said, to look at something. We asked the staff to put together for us a pictorial of how much property is there in the Village of Pinehurst that would be affected by this, and it's I understand that to some of you, one is too many. but there is precious little property that would be affected by this. But just listen, if you would, to what Leo said and what other folks have said up here, that we hear you, and there's very little reason to be incredibly repetitive about this. We're going to study it some more.
Jane Hogeman, 18 Lockton Court,
Ma'am.
which is LOCHD for dog, O-N. I apologize, I have a terrible cold. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm prepared to speak about the information that was put out about what the board looked at earlier on, but I don't purport to speak for anyone else. I'm just talking for me. Cutting the minimum townhouse unit size is like reducing the minimum lot sizes in single-family residential zones. It would make a big difference to density, the number of dwellings per units per acre. A change like this needs to be analyzed for the broader practical impact it could have on the village. You can't just look at this design element in isolation. It doesn't operate in isolation. If developers are permitted to double the residential density in multifamily zones, it's the village that over time would have to accommodate the additional traffic, demand for infrastructure, and demand for classrooms. And it's the surrounding village neighborhoods that would feel the impact to their character and privacy. In thinking about whether to change the minimum dwelling unit size, the village must first analyze its existing multifamily districts. What is the potential for population change in each district, and how would each such neighborhood look if it were built out to the new capacity? Would the higher populated neighborhoods still fit the purposes for each zone as set out in the ordinance? Would there be increased pressure to tear down historic buildings? Could existing streets handle, because we've got narrow streets here, we've got windy little roads, could the existing streets handle the traffic and parking needs? Could our schools and other village services handle the increased demand? Would it be wise to make exceptions for historic buildings, or to require additional open space to be set aside, or to require additional landscape screening in certain districts? Should minimum lot size, maximum impervious coverage, or building height also be adjusted if you're going to make this kind of a change? Would a special permit or conditional use review make sense when buildings over a certain size or density are proposed, to evaluate whether they would be out of character with the surrounding neighborhood? Mixed-use development should be included in this analysis as well. What's the build-out potential for them? And is it time to apply minimum unit sizes and density caps to these uses as well? And then there is the prospect of individual rezoning requests in undeveloped areas of the village or its ETJ to allow high-density developments where they are not now provided for. And this happens all the time in North Carolina. I don't understand it. I gotta be honest with you. I don't understand why people keep flipping the zoning down here, but they do. So we have to anticipate that in that big ETJ to the south and west portions of our village, where there's all this 5-acre zoning now, people are saying, well, they're going to come in and they're going to want to put high density and PUDs and all the rest of it. We got to look at those areas too. Unit size requirements do not operate in a vacuum. They are part of a larger context of coordinated design requirements and zoning purposes that are meant to work together to frame our village neighborhoods. Similarly, I believe that the magazine article on apartment trends in major cities, which the staff shared with the public, does not help us to understand what is appropriate for Pinehurst. The article states on page 17 that it is based on apartment sizes in the 100 largest cities in the United States, and that, quote, "The report is exclusively based on apartment data related to buildings containing 50 or more units." On pages 11 and 12, the report describes that apartments in downtown urban hubs of major cities are being designed these days to accommodate millennials looking for a pied-à-terre in the thick of city life. The downtown location and amenities, such as fitness centers, rooftop gardens, and the like, replace size as a criterion for that particular type of urban market. But we're talking about Pinehurst, which is not a major city and doesn't have a downtown urban hub like Atlanta or Charlotte or Raleigh. It doesn't have many multifamily apartment buildings with over 50 units. What we do have are quiet neighborhoods where privacy, character, and open space are important. We are concerned about increasing traffic, and we are concerned about the use of multifamily units for short-term rentals. These are the issues we should be looking at. We should be looking at the issues that apply to Pinehurst, not some article about major cities like Seattle and Atlanta and who knows. In planning for Pinehurst's future, we should be looking at the actual neighborhoods we have already and the vision our citizens want going forward. This is complicated because it means figuring out how much new growth and what type of growth is desirable. Judging by what I heard during the planning sessions this fall, and I went to all of them. I sat there like the Buddha. A lot of people want to minimize new development in the village to the extent it can be controlled. And most people want any new development to fit the character of existing Pinehurst neighborhoods. The citizen opinions gathered in the new comprehensive planning process are going to be helpful in weighing the legislative considerations that must underwrite an amendment like this. The staff report calls out one of the goals highlighted on page 3 of the current comprehensive plan. But the other 4 goals listed on that page are clearly about supporting existing village characteristics, preserve and enhance the unique character and ambiance of the entire community, especially the historic village center, enhance the quality of life for present and future residents, guide growth or change in ways that complement the unique character and ambiance of the community, and maintain the legacy of Pinehurst for future residents and visitors to enjoy. And on the topic of high-density multifamily dwellings, I question the village's 2017 fiscal report, which asked what type of new development, low-density residential, high-density residential, moderate or high-intensity commercial, industrial, what type of new development is the most profitable to the village in terms of highest property tax returns for lowest service demands. The conclusion in the report, counterintuitively, was high-density multifamily residential, because the report based its calculations on an assumption from the U.S. Census Bureau from a few years ago, that these apartment projects would have a 68% vacancy rate, 68% vacancy rate, and yet would still pay 100% of their taxes. Really? First of all, land use planning cannot be based on an expectation that permitted projects will operate at less than full capacity. No municipality would allow a developer to design a shopping center with only half the requisite parking just because they didn't have an anchor tenant in place at the time of the application. The developer would be required to put in enough parking to support the entire project because someday it could be used. We can't assume that new apartments will never need village services. And if the report's statistics were true and were to remain true over time, if high-density residential developments only ever have 1/3 occupancy, why would we encourage more of them to be built? How do dark and empty apartment buildings make a vibrant community? I believe that the question of amending the minimum townhouse size needs quite a different analysis from what it has had so far. We need to look at what would really happen to our existing and prospective multifamily districts if this new build-out were to happen to maximum capacity, just like if you were going to look at a shopping center application. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for me?
Thank you, folks.
May I make a couple comments?
Joel,
had a couple
were you going to
oh,
say
did?
something?
You're always very well prepared. I enjoy hearing you. I think your points are always well made. I'm just curious, and don't read anything into this question. What would you like to see as minimum square footage for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units? I'm just curious.
I don't have an answer to that. My question to you is, somebody did a certain amount of work to get it at 1,500 square feet. Why are you changing it up? Why are you changing it up?
And that's my question to you, is 1,500 square feet, to all of you in the audience, is that a number that you'd want us to learn to live with? Okay. All right. I'm looking for guidelines. Thank you.
All right, David.
Well, my first comment is I don't think the Buddha ever got a standing ovation.
He doesn't need one.
This is true.
But
Be an inside joke.
I would agree with you. While we're looking at the map and we see the things that are zoned, my eyeball scans around and says, okay, we're talking about probably about 10% of the land area that's affected. But the challenge is once you have that written in here, then the possibility to say, hey, look, you have it here, right beside it, let's do this. I think you could have some, what we would call scope creep. That's a possibility. So I agree with you there. I never heard anybody who planned, who did cash flow analysis and planned on 66% vacancy in any unit they did.
The 8%.
Well, whatever. It doesn't, the numbers don't turn around, nobody would build it. But I agree with you there, too. Why build a bunch of stuff that sits empty? That doesn't make any sense. I had one last thing. No, it escapes me, so I'll rest.
Just one other comment, and I think I'm correct, but I got enough people here that'll tell me if I'm not. Changing the square footage of the units will have no effect on the density. The number of units, no, not as it is now, not
Let
as
him finish,
current
folks.
laws. So if you've got to have if you're allowed a certain number of units on a piece of property, it doesn't make any difference whether they're 750 square feet or 1,500 square feet. It doesn't go automatically. So if you cut it in half, you don't double the density. You'd have to come back and ask us for a variance.
Here's the thing.
There are density requirements for these zones.
In 2 of the 4, there are.
Pardon?
In 2 of the 4, correct?
The RMF zone has a maximum 6 units per acre.
Uh-huh.
And the VMU is 8 units per acre. But
Right.
the
Actually, that's
other
Village
two-
Residential, VR, not VMU.
Oh, sorry. But the other 2 central village zones have no density caps.
You can downsize.
Right, and neither do the mixed use
Okay.
in OP or NC. And another problem is if you've got a great big lot, if you've got a lot that's an acre or a lot that's 2 acres, it's one thing, okay, you can have, but if you've got a 1/4 acre lot and there's a 6 unit per acre, how many do you get? Maybe you should be thinking about you have to have.
You're not going to do it. You know,
5,500 square feet of lot area per unit, rather than doing it. I mean, the density things that you have do not cover all the territory, and they have challenges already, is the point I'm making about that.
We don't disagree. I just want to make the point that you just made. If you've got 6 units per acre.
Yep.
That's
It
all
doesn't
you
make
can
any
build,
difference whether there's 6
regardless
units
of
of
the size of
5,000
the
square
building.
feet or 1,000 square feet.
Well, another thing is, if you've got a historic building, and how many units are you going to jam into it? And maybe, you know, if you can get a whole bunch more units on your property, then there's going to be pressure to take that building down. I mean,
It becomes a volume calculation.
Yeah, as well.
It's why we've got a historic district. I'm not disagreeing with you. I want to make that very plain. I'm not disagreeing with any of you. I just want you to understand the basic that simply changing either up or down the number of square feet of a unit will not automatically change or increase the density. That's the only point I'm trying to make to you.
And the counter argument to that, and then I'll go sit back down, is that because all of these different design standards, plus the purposes of each zone, are designed to work together, the minute you change one, you're going to have a ripple effect on all the rest of these standards, such as building size, building height, setbacks, amount of parking that's available. And you've got most of these, not all of them, because the RMF zones are all over the place, but then all of the central core village ones that also have multifamily available. And that's where you've got these little roads, little narrow roads, winding roads in the historic. But I mean, I think you need to be very, very cautious about changes that are made. You need to look much more carefully, do a much more comprehensive analysis.
Yeah, we don't disagree with you. I just don't want you to think that because you do A, you automatically get B.
No, I understand.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's not an automatic reaction.
Do you
And I
have
just
any,
wanted you to understand
do you
that.
have any argument for the 6 or 8 units per acre?
I mean, should it be more units or fewer units?
Do you have any argument with that?
The current
Well,
density requirements.
No, I
What
really,
you are arguing for,
what I
the
focused
way
on-
I'm hearing, excuse me, is that you want some control on the zones that have no
Oh, yes,
standard. That's what I'm hearing.
yes,
All
exactly.
right, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Hey. Again, folks, we have, I guess there may be 30 people, but again, I'm hearing what the people are saying. I don't want to hear it again and again and again. Has someone got some comments that can offer something different for our consideration? Yes, ma'am.
Louise Velour again. David said something early on that hit home with us. There's a piece of property, and I think this is what's driving our mayor, on over by Forest Creek, that a developer wants to put in a small shopping center in addition to housing, and wants to put a cut-through number 6 by Lamplighter Village. Lamplighter Village has applied to purchase that land from the village because the village evidently owns it, according to the article in the newspaper. Our concern, and if need be, I will go to every person in number 6 and get a petition up against this builder, because it is a residential area and we do not need commercial traffic coming through our community. I live right on Juniper Creek Boulevard, which is already a true boulevard. I mean, the worst offenders are our Pinehurst Resort buses. I can't step on the roadway to get my mail out of the mailbox because the traffic is like this all day long from spring to winter. It is just unbearable now, and the whole purpose is for people to avoid the circle. Well, if you put that traffic through, the people coming from Carthage and Vass and everywhere else, they're going to cut through going the other way. So we don't need that kind of amendment to any zoning so that these people can continue to build what they want to build and not have any concern for the local residents.
Okay, you realize that that development is not in Pinehurst?
Well, then why are they proposing it through Pinehurst? Why did that article indicate that
That
that?
development has nothing to do with Pinehurst as
But
far as
Pinehurst-
zoning is concerned.
Pinehurst can object to it, just
Oh,
like
yes,
they
they
were.
will. They will.
Are you sure?
Yes, I live in number 6 also.
Well, I'm
right.
glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kiefer Welch, 45 McLean Road. I want to talk to process. I'm surely not going to debate Jane on numbers, for God's sakes. What you're hearing and what David acknowledged early on.
Oh, you know him.
No, I've never met the man. Excuse me,
We have never met each other.
Mr. Kelly. What you're hearing is a great deal of cynicism in the community about the process, and everyone here is afraid that a recommendation or a motion from you all would subvert the long-range planning process that's currently in work. And it would be pretty easy for you all to pass something, and we hadn't heard the skepticism that we've heard this afternoon, which is heartening. The one thing that I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but one of the things we'd like to potentially hear is an insurance policy. Is a motion made by your board that would obviate any change in square footage or density until the current long-range planning process is complete. Is that correct? Thank you.
I'll do 2 more folks, okay? And then, sir, in the back, you're next.
John Taylor, 205 Cherokee Road, and whether relevant or not, I also serve on the Historic Preservation Commission, so sometimes I get to sit where you are on other issues. And I may repeat a couple of things, but if I do, I will try to be very brief on those. I would point a couple of things out. Since 2017, there's been an election, and there's been the replacement of someone on the village council due to health reasons, as you know. I suspect if you were to go ask the city council today whether they want you to go forward with this process now, in advance of hearing from a consultant they're paying, a think tank they've convened, and the long-range land use plan, I think they would say, you don't really need to do that work just today. I could be wrong. I heard one council member at the last council meeting suggest we can go slowly on this in the open session.
Can I answer the question now?
Do I have a choice?
Yes. That's exactly what's going to happen. It's
You're
going to slow
going to ask
down.
the council.
It's going to slow down. We're going to prepare a report for the council's consideration prior to the first blush, I said, of the comprehensive plan. And we will reconvene a subcommittee to restudy everything that we've heard and probably some new material to present for council's consideration. And I might add that the directive for us to proceed in that manner was just received this week.
With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, isn't that one of the 4 options that we're considering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 2, I would echo Kiefer's statement. Good process makes good decisions. Acting in front of these people by actually changing any of the numbers, in my opinion, would be crazy. Let them at least speak. Let that process, you can make whatever recommendations you want or provide any thoughts to the council, but actually changing the PDO, which I guess is not really your job anyway, it's council's job, would be crazy at this point. To the point on the difference between minimum square footage and density. there's no developer who thinks the way you outlined. You may be 100% right on the rules, on the way the regulations read today, but if we think of a 5-acre lot, and you reduce the number of one-bedrooms to 700 square feet, and there's 225,000 square feet in 5 acres, someone's going to say, we got room for more than 6 here. The developer will drive the request to you. You don't have to say yes, but the request will come. You will make it possible for the request to come, whereas if you keep it at 1,500, you make it more difficult. On the point that a relatively small...
Let me answer your point. You've made my point, and that is that they would, and I just want you all to understand the process. They would
I understand the process.
They would have to then come before Planning and Zoning, or Board of Appeals, the Village Council, to get permission to do that. And all of us sitting on this board and all the village councils, whether you believe it or not, I believe it from the bottom of my heart, it's not the highest paying job I've ever had in my life.
No, I get that.
But it is one of the most interesting because we get a chance to listen to what other people would like. And I can tell you, I've lived here a little over 30 years. I remember when this building didn't exist. I remember when Steve Smith, the mayor, proposed it, and we almost burned him in effigy. And today we're all sitting here delighted that we have it. I remember when 15501 was 2 lanes. We have 1 traffic light in this town. It's a fabulous place to live. I moved here from downtown Boston. I know what traffic is, trust me.
I lived here 25 years. I moved here from downtown New York.
Okay.
My
so-
daughter lives in a less than 400 square foot apartment. There's a place for those.
No, I understand that. It's the point I'm trying to make to you, is that we all love it here as much as you do. I think the reason that we serve on this board is because we love it as much as you all do, and we want to listen to you. And if Mr. Strickland is in the audience,
He is.
He was.
here he is. I applaud you, John, for bringing more people, because I've been screaming to have this happen so we could listen.
All right. Is that it?
No.
Oh, more?
Not even close. All of these things have knock-on effects on traffic, as was debated in the first session. I believe I'm correct in stating that Moore County was one of the 2 last counties in the state of North Carolina to adopt a comprehensive transportation plan. Not your fault, not blaming that on you.
Thank you.
The Western Connector, in my humble opinion, is never going to get built. Most people are saying it's at least 15 to 20 years if they started the approval process tomorrow before it would happen, and there is no approval process yet. There's not even a proposal to DOT. You have to think, and I agree with you, the HPC, we don't get paid any more than you do. And I do that because I've lived here 25 years. I have never owned a house that was less than 80 years old. I like the way, one of the reasons I moved here was the feel of Old Town, where I live. And you have to do that out of a sense of sort of civic responsibility and a desire to maintain standards. And going down to 700 square feet is a slippery slope. You set the bar lower and developers will come to you with proposals. Sure, you can say no. I had someone else, a friend of mine here, who served on this committee a number of years ago who can't remember the last time you didn't approve a proposal. That may not be right, just what I was told.
That's grossly incorrect.
Okay? And that may not be bad. Maybe the proposals were great. Maybe, but you are the Planning and Zoning Board, not the Moore County or the Pinehurst Economic Development Commission. Trying to read my own notes here.
Of that.
The point was made in the first meeting with regard to statistics that you have. And I can't dispute them. It's not my field of expertise. But you can think, because you are stuck with the results, whether they turn out to be like the average or not. Now, a field that I do know very well is the stock market. And over the last 100 years, it's averaged 8%. In the last decade, you got 0. You were stuck with that, waiting for your 8%. So you can, there's a joke about the man with his feet in a bucket of ice and his head in the oven, on average feels fine. But none of us wants to live that way. right? So averages are not the only thing that drive decisions. And the ramifications of this decision, coming at the time that it's coming, while these other larger studies are underway, could not possibly be worse. And the knock-on effects, I think, two things we can't repeal. The law of unintended consequences is one of them. And there will be unintended consequences of this, and it's not likely to be that nobody starts building this. Last point I will make, and these are numbers from the week before Christmas. How many of the 1,500 square foot units in the greens at the Arboretum are vacant now? Any of you know? 1. 20 out of 21 or 21 out of 22 occupied. The ones that you approved at 900 square feet that magically turned into 700, that magically turned into 675, do you know how many of those are vacant? It's either 11 out of 21 or 10. It's 50%. If there is great demand for this, and someone said earlier there are no developer proposals to build such units, why are you considering this? Where's the demand? I know where 10 or 11 people can go right now. They can move in tomorrow.
We hear you and we don't disagree with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back.
Good evening. I guess it's evening. I'm Bill Keith. I live at 1095 Longleaf Drive, Northwest here in Pinehurst. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I've been here 14 years. During that 14-year period of time, I served 7 years as the president of my Property Owners Association. I also served on the Neighborhood Advisory Committee that Mayor George Lane put together, and I did that for 7 or 8 years. So I have some involvement with the process around here. I had a long list of things, and in the sake of brevity and because everybody'd like to eat dinner, I'm going to skip down to the bottom. A lot of it's redundant. One of the things I would like to bring up is a few things that I heard tonight and last meeting. As far as justifying the status quo, I think when we look at making changes, we need to justify the change before we start trying to justify the status quo. So I don't think that should be our normal approach. Last meeting, we talked about the fact that when the Greens was being discussed here, there were only 12 or 13 people that showed up in opposition to the change of the square footage. I have with me here a list which anyone's welcome to look at, although I won't pass it out because it has a lot of people's email addresses on it. But it's a 10-page list of people and their email addresses who objected to the change that was proposed in the square footage over there. If all 500 of those people had showed up, half of them would be standing out in the street because we couldn't get them all in here. What they did was they sent representatives, 10 or a dozen people, like-thinking people who they had coordinated with in advance, to present their side of the issue. So that's why we had a dozen people here. That's why we didn't have 500 people here. I do have the list of who those people were. So anyone that wants to take a look at it is welcome to. One of the things that I think we need to clear up before we get too deep in the weeds on a lot of this stuff is the square footage definition. We've talked about 750 square feet, 900 square feet, 1,500 square feet. Do we have a definition of square footage?
We do.
And do we have that documented someplace? Reason I ask.
So, it's in the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. It was recently revised to designate that heated square footage. The word heated was not in the definition until about a year ago.
Okay, well, the reason I ask is this is the 7th home that I've owned in the 4th state, and definitions of square footage is different from place to place. A number of the places I lived at, They didn't count hallways, they didn't count pantries, they didn't count closets. Down in Florida, it's square footage under air. We're talking about square footage heated. And then there's the issue of what happened with the greens, with the patios and decks and things like that. And I bought an 1,805 square foot house when I moved here because we downsized. I have a 150 square foot screen porch, and I have a 150 square foot deck. That's another 300 square feet. If I follow the rule applied to the greens, do I advertise my house as a 2,100 square foot house when I go to sell it? Well, we've clarified that by saying under heat. Well, I can't really heat the deck. But I've got a 450 square foot garage with a sink, with water, with an insulated garage door. And if I put up a wall heater in there, can I list my house as a 2,200 square foot house? Or do we have the square footage thing defined to say excludes garages, excludes decks, is taken from measurements internally, is the additive quantity of all of the room dimensions, what determines square footage? I think before we rework ordinances or write new ordinances, we need to make sure that all of the terms that we're using are accurately defined. That would have prevented what happened over at the Greens. And I don't think that the current change to say just heated square footage resolves the issue. So I won't go through the rest of the stuff on my list. I'm sure in the future we'll have an opportunity to get together again. I just close by saying one thing. To those of you who may be interested in theater or had an interest in theater, I always did, especially when I was younger, people call me once in a while and say, why did you move to that place? Why did you move to North Carolina? I was all over the place before that. And the best way I've come up with to describe it to people is that Pinehurst is kind of like Brigadoon. And I'm always afraid that one day the fog will lift and the magical place will be gone. So in the pursuit of the almighty dollar, let's not blow all the fog away and have the magical place disappear one morning. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Folks, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing unless there's someone that has something different to say. I knew it.
I only have one comment to say, and that is, and I'm reading this from this piece of paper here, the vision of Pinehurst. The village of Pinehurst is a charming, vibrant community which reflects our rich history and traditions. And I feel like we're pulling away from that tradition and our vision. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'd like a motion to close the public hearing number 2, please.
So moved?
David, second? Second, Joel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. We do have time for discussion now amongst ourselves as to what can happen with this application. At this time, we can vote to approve to forward the recommendation of 750 square feet for one-bedroom apartment, 1,000 square feet for a two-bedroom apartment, or 1,250 square feet for a three-bedroom apartment for council's consideration and approval. We can deny the application. Again, understand that the application is made by the Village of Pinehurst. Or we can table it, subject to further discussion and study amongst ourselves to prepare a report as requested by Village Council, again, prior to the first release of the comprehensive long-range plan. Any other comments before we try to decide on
I have a motion.
which way?
Before we have a motion, can we have more discussion?
More discussion, certainly.
Yeah, thanks. Just in listening to the comments from both the board and from the folks who attended today, I definitely, what David was saying resonated with me, and what folks were saying about how we are in the midst of a planning process. And if we're really listening to the folks in the village, this planning process with the think tanks, et cetera, really should be steering where we are looking. And it feels to me wrong to circumvent that decision by coming to sort of an isolated decision. And also in listening to what Ms. Hogeman had to say, you know, you're exactly right that, or at least in my mind, you're exactly right, that this isn't just a question of square footage. You know, that's just one of the elements that we're looking at. There are questions of density. There's the question of height restrictions. There are questions of what is this going to do to the historic district. You know, there are 4 different districts that we're talking about here, and perhaps each of them should be considered differently. 2 of them take into account density, 2 don't. You know, it's a multi-layered consideration that we're looking at. The only thing where I found myself, I don't know if disagreeing is the right word with David, but my antenna kind of went up. It always goes up when we talk about variances, and variances as a way of looking at planning. I think it's really important with planning that development cannot drive the planning process. And I worry that sometimes that happens when we go on a case-by-case basis, only looking at applications and are we going to issue a variance. I think it's really important that planning needs to drive development. And so that's, I, in the future, do not want to get us in a position where we are time and time again considering variance after variance after variance. I think that we do need to have a comprehensive vision and let that dictate to developers what we want for the village, rather than having the village buffeted.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I would add on that somebody from the public said, hey, I don't think there's been a request that came through planning and zoning that wasn't approved. What we have to remember is there's probably 99% of what goes on, I'll let Alex comment on this, that's construction. Nothing comes through here because there's a piece of land, it's zoned for a certain use, somebody buys it and they build a house or whatever structure it's zoned for. And that process goes through the normal planning process without anything before the Planning and Zoning Board. And a lot of single-family homes, and I don't know what the percent is, but I'd guess it's probably 90% go through without anything ever coming to here. So no, it's not a way, it should be management by exception, I agree with you.
Yeah.
That a variance is that.
Yeah,
That
and
there's some
I'm not
sort of
against variances, I just don't think they can drive the process.
Right. But if we look at how many apartment buildings are built in Pinehurst in the last 20 years, the only one that happened was a variance.
Right, correct.
And I'm saying if something's driving that at some future, that we need not change the PDO, but we can deal with that on an exception basis. And I would guess that if such a request would come through, that we would have a lot more people come to the meeting at that point.
I imagine so.
I think it's great that we're having this opportunity to look at the square footages, because if the comprehensive plan does come back and it does make a recommendation that we reduce our square footage requirements and we do incorporate more multifamily units, we have had the opportunity to hear from the citizens, and you guys have brought up excellent points, and the consultants have not had the opportunity to hear as much feedback as we have today. So I think this is really wonderful that we've had this opportunity, and if they do come and ask us to reduce the square footage, we will be able to say yes, no, you know, did you consider this or consider that? I also agree that we don't need to make that decision before we get the comprehensive plan, but I really think it's good that we vet this proposal and these scenarios with the citizens before the comprehensive plan, because there's going to be a lot of different recommendations in the plan, and this one really needs to be considered individually, I think. So thank you for all your input.
Well, I think the council made it very clear on what they want us to provide a recommendation on. I mean, I don't think there's any, I mean, it's right here. It's clear as night as day. I don't know if kicking the can down the road should, continue, or, we just make a decision here as P and Z and let the village council, further pursue this.
We make recommendations to the village
Yeah,
council.
make a recommendation, correct.
And nowhere in our charter does it say that the planning and zoning board does what the village council asks it to do or tells it to do, or only that and that and only that.
Nor did I insinuate
No,
that. Yeah.
understood. I'm just clarifying.
Mhm.
Yeah. But if we're done, I'd like to make a motion. Or were there
Any other comments?
I'll make one comment. In relative today to the PDO, specifically SR-3, the dwellings multifamily, it's very sparse. It focuses directly on the 1,500 square feet. One sentence. So when we look to recommend something to the council, we're focused again on the square footage. And if we approve this, then we expand the amount of words, but we're still focused on the square footage. I think there's opportunity as a board, if we're going to take a look at the ordinance and recommend something to the council, I think there's opportunity there to expand the ordinance, make it a little bit more specific towards our direction as a community. I think there's more opportunity, and we should look further than the square footage.
Like they say, more research is needed.
Correct.
I'd like to make a comment. I'm torn listening to all of the folks up here. I'm sorry, thank you. I'm torn between this board studying this further and making a recommendation to the village council that recognizes what this community has said, as opposed to just recommending that we do nothing to this change in the square footage. My concern there is that we really haven't given, if we do that, that we really haven't given the village council the guidance of the hours and hours that we've spent and listened to you all. And that, to me, would not be correct. I think if we're going to make a recommendation, we need to make one that reflects what we've heard here, the studies that we've done, so they can have something to follow, as opposed to just simply, no, we're going to turn this down and leave it at 1,500 square feet. I think that will have more impact with the village council if we can back up our recommendation with some reasoning and explain what we've heard from you all over at least 2 meetings and frankly, out having coffee, et cetera.
Anyone else? Do we have a motion?
Yes. I move to recommend to the village council that no change be made to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance for the minimum heated square footage for multifamily dwellings, period. That in the future, should the comprehensive plan demonstrate a need, comma, that the village council at such time should reinitiate its request, period.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Dave Kelly, second by Paul Roberts. All in favor? Let's have a roll call vote.
David Kelly,
I recommend approval.
Mike Marsh,
No.
Cindy Burnett,
No.
Jeremy Hooper,
Yes.
Julia Latham,
No.
Paul Roberts,
Yes?
Joel Schreiber,
No,
4 noes, 3 yeses. The noes carry.
I'd like to make a motion.
Make a motion.
I move to reconvene the subcommittee to consider public input obtained during the public hearings and to further evaluate the proposed text amendment for the minimum heated square footage for multifamily dwellings. And although I don't know that I need to add this, but all of the ramifications that square footage means, as you pointed out.
Can I suggest adding to your motion that the comprehensive plan that is currently being considered needs to be a driver in that discussion, that it be part of that discussion. It would be premature for us to make any recommendation until that document is considered, that as well as the input from the members of these meetings be part of the consideration of this board. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, that was too lengthy, but I think you know what I was trying to say.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Glenn.
That was amendment to the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion by Joel, amended by Julia, seconded by Jeremy. Roll call vote.
Can I, hold on a second, I'm trying to capture what,
I'm sorry, I rattled.
what I was going to do is try to capture it and put it on the end.
Please.
Good. Let's see. So you moved to reconvene the subcommittee to consider public input obtained during the public hearings and to further evaluate the proposed text amendment for the minimum heated square footage for multifamily dwellings, and move that the comprehensive plan be considered in this process. Is that sufficient?
I would argue that the comprehensive plan should drive the process rather than just be considered, but perhaps I'm wordsmithing.
No, that's fine. I'm trying to capture what you said, so.
Sorry.
Just insert drive, David, and I think that does it.
So are you looking at that the comprehensive plan should be approved and finalized, and then this should take place? That it's a predecessor?
In my mind, yes.
Okay, do we want to state that? That it be reconvened after the comprehensive plan is approved?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry?
So everyone understands. Can we have that restated?
You want me to take a shot?
Go, man.
Thank you, David.
Here it comes. Move to reconvene the subcommittee after approval of the Pinehurst Comprehensive Plan.
No. Subcommittee wants to do the work now.
It's your
Okay.
motion. I tried to capture what you said.
That was my intention, Leo.
Okay.
Right. So reconvene the subcommittee, comma, after approval of the Pinehurst Comprehensive Plan, comma, to consider public input obtained during the public hearings and to further evaluate the proposed text amendment for the minimum heated square footage for multifamily dwellings, period.
That satisfies me.
Since it was your motion, that's,
My motion.
oh, was it yours?
It was his motion that I hijacked.
Yeah,
A dual thing, okay.
just as happy if it's your motion.
Point of discussion. Don't we want the subcommittee to have input into the comprehensive plan?
I think you're right.
I think you're right, that's why,
Yes.
yeah. So
So we should actually reconvene the subcommittee before the comprehensive plan is
correct.
finalized.
You're correct, Mike. Yeah.
I think, I would like to see this subcommittee reconvene and summarize all the information that we have gotten from the citizens and our research, and have a report that prepared to go along, not make a decision or decide on anything, but to
But
make
to
sure
accompany
that,
the comprehensive plan, the
Yes.
revised comprehensive plan.
or to give to the council that, so they have that information when they're looking at the comprehensive plan.
All right. Is everybody confused now?
Sorry.
I was going to say for clarity, maybe we restart the motion.
Yes.
Let's, wait, we have a motion on the table. It was seconded.
I don't know what I seconded at this point. So,
I'm trying to capture what you guys
Yeah.
just
No,
said.
no,
If
no.
you give me a second.
Get this thing straightened out first.
Yeah.
Do we have to vote on that, or can that be pulled?
I would like to withdraw my second.
I think following procedures, Robert's Rules of Order, there's been a motion, there's been a proposed amendment to that motion that's sort of unclear, that was seconded. So I think if it's unclear, it would probably be prudent to try that again Joel would have to agree that this proposed amendment, which was articulated by Julia and as well as David, to again, try that again, maybe go ahead and maybe, if the wish of the board is to do a vote on that motion and second it, because it's on the table, because of clarity, potentially strike it.
Vote no and start over?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's fine.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure it's my move.
Well, I'm gonna make it your move.
We're doing a roll call vote, or do you want me to?
We need you to, since
I'm
you're the
trying
one
to
that's
capture
writing.
what we just said.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
Give me a second.
I'm older than you and I can't remember these things. I think, David, that at least from what I'm hearing, that we want our input based on what we've heard.
I think I captured it. If you let me get it.
Okay,
give
go
it a
ahead.
shot.
Go ahead.
I'll give it a shot, and you can correct me if I've missed something.
I doubt
Okay.
it, but go ahead.
So now it would be modified to, I move to reconvene the subcommittee to consider public input obtained during the public hearings, comma, so that the subcommittee can participate in the comprehensive plan process, comma, and to then further evaluate the proposed text amendment for the minimum heated square footage for multifamily dwellings. That kind of sets up a continuum where afterwards we finish.
Yeah.
I think I captured it.
I think so.
Okay.
Could you read that one more time?
I could? Okay. So this is Joel. I move to reconvene the subcommittee to consider public input obtained during the public hearings, comma, so that the subcommittee can participate in the comprehensive plan process, comma, and to then further evaluate the proposed text amendment for the minimum heated square footage for multifamily dwellings. It probably would be helpful if I had a computer and I could type it and you could see it, but I don't. Sorry.
Everybody understand?
Yes.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. I'm not going to repeat it. But I think everybody understands what's going to happen. Roll call vote, please.
David Kelly,
No.
Mike Marsh,
Yes.
Cindy Burnett,
Yes.
Jeremy Hooper,
Yes.
Julia Latham,
Yes.
Paul Roberts,
Yes.
Joel Schreiber.
Yes.
Is that a no?
6-1, motion carried.
Joel was yes.
Okay. That's that. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your input, your company, and we'll probably see you again later. We do have some general business to do here,
Not very
folks.
clear, no. It's
Um,
close. Yeah, no, that wasn't the directive that we were given.
Definitely a sausage-making event today.
I don't like delaying things, and that's all we're doing is delaying it. I recommend.
I don't think that's all we're doing. Or at least I hope that's not all we're doing. You know, I feel like a lot of...
Residents are not the ones who are doing the comprehensive review, right?
No.
So we've heard from the residents.
But I think taking that input and making it part of looking at what's happening.
Welcome back.
Otherwise, we've just left this whole process on the ground to be picked up and reinvented again.
Where have you heard that before?
Well, I mean, just between us, I mean, shut that off for a second. Am I wrong in my assessment that it just seems like it's very sparse?
Hey, don't you miss it?
I'm like,
No,
Chair,
I know, that's true.
Complicated, I get it, but at the same time, I mean, we just have one sentence, maybe there is something that needs to be said.
If there can be some sort of sharing of information between the subcommittees.
Mr. Leader.
Oh, sorry, there you go.
No, I'm just going to turn it off.
Microphone. Go. How's it?
Dying, that's what it means. I would like to reconvene the old subcommittee that was consisted of Joel Schreiber, Cindy Burnett, myself, and Jeremy. Would you like to volunteer? All right, so that's 4 Planning and Zoning Board members. Kevin Drum, as village councilman, has offered to serve as an ex officio member. And we'll also have staff with Alex Cameron, Wendy Hutchison, and perhaps Natalie every now and then. And if possible, I'd like to set up a meeting in that subcommittee as soon as possible. So if you have your calendars, let's take a look. What does the 15th of January look like in the afternoon?
You're talking about 4? Yeah, I need.
What time? 6:30. Oh, okay. Jeremy?
That's great.
Alex?
Good.
Good? Okay. All right. January 15th. Four o'clock?
Yep.
Somewhere in Village Hall. Okay. Does anybody else have any business for the good of the organization?
I do have one comment. Since and I think it was brought out several times on this public hearing number 2, that it was something brought forth by the village council. I think there were village council folks in the audience. Should we get them to restate their position and explain their motives of changing that? Would that help the subcommittee come to a recommendation?
I think with a member of the council on the subcommittee, we can get to that.
Okay.
Okay?
Is there any way that we can get a copy of Jane's report for review with the subcommittee? Can we get a copy of it before the meeting so we can review it? I thought she had a lot of good points.
Good point. The next meeting date is February 7th. Anything that we know that's going to be on the agenda?
Not at this time.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
No.
Not really, but you want to say something in 2 minutes?
In the June 27th, 2017 council minutes, there was a public hearing on heated square footage. And in the minutes, it says, the Planning and Zoning Board asked the council to do a study of requiring the size, of recalculating the size of 1,500 square feet. So yes, I'm splitting hairs here, but the council did ask you, but you guys asked first. I know you weren't on the board, probably half of you. And in the minutes of this June 27th, after they voted, the council suggested that planning and zoning revisit minimum square footage for different dwellings and calculation of unfinished basements. And that's what it says in the minutes. So I would just ask that you clarify what exactly you are looking at, not just you're changing the square footage, but that's what I read in the minutes. June 27th, 2017, and that was their directive to you. Thank you.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Meeting adjourned at 6:32 p.m.